following is a conversation with Ken Easley of Ken Easley and Son Racing Pigeons. Ken gave a very interesting interview discussing his history in the sport, his accomplishments, and his relationship with Pipa in Belgium. I really appreciate Ken's time. Thank you. All right, Ken Easley and Son Racing Pigeons. How are you? Thank you for coming on.
Great, doing good. Thanks, Jeff.
Been looking forward to this for a while. You're a very well-known name in the sport. You've had a lot of success, and so there's a lot of people that have requested you to have you come on. So there's a lot of people excited to see this. Where did Racing Pigeons begin for you? How did you get started in this game?
Well, I had pigeons when I was a boy. My grandfather had pigeons and my dad had pigeons. But I really didn't get into it until I was probably about 10 years old. I liked them, but I was too little to understand much. When I was 10, I wanted my own pigeons. And so I ended up getting a few pair of rollers. And then it wasn't long before I got some 500-mile racing pigeons from a Romanian fellow that lived nearby. He had just red bars and blue bars, and I ended up with a pair of each. So
That's great. So where did you grow up? Where were you when this was happening?
I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's where you got your first pigeons, and you're, I guess, basically third generation having pigeons, right?
Yeah.
That's great. So what age did you start to compete then? If you got your first birds, then you got a couple pairs, did you just kind of have them for fun then, and then eventually start training them out? How did that start to go into being more competitive?
I just had them for fun. My dad, he would let me put them in a cardboard box in the trunk. And when we went to grandpa's for the weekend, I'd turn them loose and they'd always be at home waiting. I just had an open little hole in the top of the garage and I had a little loft up there and they would go in that hole. There was no traps or bobs. They were free lofting.
Yeah.
I didn't really start competing until I got into competing with rollers. And I did that for 22 years. And I got, my goal was to get my Master Flyer award. And so you get about 50 points every time you win a national or a world cup. And you have to have 750 points. So it took a while and I finally got my Master Flyer. I was the 8th in the world to receive it. I received it
Wow.
the same year as Hein Biker out of Holland.
Mm-hmm.
He and I both got it. I was 8th and he was 9th. Anyway,
That's
kind of
incredible.
felt like I had run my course with the rollers, and I always liked the racers. I don't like breeding for a fault, which is what rollers have. I wanted the racers. They're, a man's bird. So I kind of graduated from being a boy to a man. I wanted pigeons that I'm breeding for strength and intelligence and feather and muscle tone and everything that goes along with putting together a fine animal.
Right. How old were you when you were doing rollers and then transitioned into racing homers?
Mm. Um, I had to be 35, 40.
Gotcha. So you were,
It's still been a while. I'll be 65 this year.
oh wow, okay. Well,
Yeah.
you don't look 65.
Well, I appreciate that.
No, so you went from rollers to racing pigeons. Where did you go to obtain your racing pigeons?
I picked up some local pigeons and competed with those, and I had just two birds on my team, two little red bar hens, and decided I would go join and start racing in the middle of an old bird season. And I was 12th and 13th places. I remember they came in together.
On the
And I'm,
first race?
yeah,
Wow,
I
that's
was
great.
this side of the mountain and everybody else is on the other side of the mountain range down by the Rio Grande River. And I'm at 7,000 feet and on the back side of the mountains. So they have to traverse through the mountains. And I'm kind of in the middle of the 11,000 foot peak. So they have to go 5 miles around. So unless we're flying northwest or southwest, I don't get that angle. And of course, they have to climb to elevation. So it's hard to win.
Yeah.
Uh, so I decided I need some better pigeons. So I talked to Alphonse Claus and bought some birds from him back in 2007. And those birds started coming really good. I started winning. From 250 on out, if I put my mind to it, it's pretty much, I won't say unbeatable, but, I had some first through 12th and first through 24th place before another pigeon was on the board. Had a couple of really good seasons up here and was champion loft and first average speed, 32 champions, state champion, and pretty high up. I had 7 uh, national ace qualifiers and 3 Hall of Fame qualifiers. I was 6 sprint ace in the USA. Anyway, I started doing really well with it and winning stacks of diplomas and stuff. And I decided I wanted to one-loft race. My son was playing baseball and I didn't want to miss any of his games. I
Right.
like racing pigeons, but my son's number one. So I stopped flying in the local clubs in about 2015. The last race I flew in, it was a 350-mile race, and I won first place with a 10-minute lead over second.
Wow. So where are you currently?
I'm in Cedar Crest, New Mexico.
So that's where your old bird club was that we were discussing, where you got these awards?
Is Albuquerque. Is
Albuquerque.
they're on the other side over there. I'm up in a
Okay,
little,
I'm with
yeah.
you now. So you started racing club there. You got some good racing homers. So your background with rollers kind of gave you a jump start on taking care of the racing pigeons. And was there trial and error involved with that, or did you kind of have a good idea what to do? Did you study from somebody? How did you kind of figure out a system to put in place?
It was mixed. When I first started flying, I was flying, I was flying my racing pigeons like rollers. I was flying them on wheat, Milo with a little bit of safflower and a little bit of Austrian peas. And I had those jokers going way up with my kit and they'd fly for 2 hours, 3 hours. If a hawk came around, they'd fly 6 hours.
Right,
I was flying them. They were light and buoyant. I didn't give them a lot of feed. But as I've gotten into it, I've beefed it up and started making my own mix with patty rice and, about 30% corn and those sorts of things.
right.
Uh,
So whenever you were racing club wise and having all that success, what kind of system were you running? Was it uh, motivation style? Was it to a perch? Was it to a box? Tell us about, what kind of system you had in place that was helping you with that success.
I was flying to a perch, just like you would rollers. Um, and I would fly them until after weaning, I would fly them until they were routing probably 2 hours.
Right.
And after they were routing 2 hours, around here, I can see the Santa Fe Mountains if I stick my head out the window right here.
Yeah.
And it has snow on it, and it's about 55 miles from me, and I can see it real good. So I started taking my birds 50 miles the first time because I know they can see over here. It's a huge mountain. Didn't lose many and worked them out until I get them out to about 100. And there's a cherry grove down south where they grow cherries. It's called Carrizozo, New Mexico. They've got a roadside park at 110 miles.
Hmm.
And so if we're flying southwest, I take them to that roadside park and turn them loose. And I did that every Saturday morning like clockwork. As soon as the sun was on the horizon, setting, had raised up where I could see it, I turned them loose. Um, and I would race home, and they were usually already in the loft waiting on me. And as I started flying with the club, I didn't do anything during the week except loft fly them every day, except for Friday. I learned not to do that because they could get a hawk after them and fly for 6 or 7 hours into the, you know,
Burn
and
themselves up before the race.
yeah, so I never flew them on Fridays. And every time they trap, I always gave them those raw Spanish peanuts. I'd mix them in when they were little and make sure every bird was eating them. And then I would take them away from them after I knew that they loved them. Then when they would trap, I'd put a few in the trap and I would set in the floor and I would hand hold and make sure every one of them got about 3 or 4 or 5 peanuts apiece. And then when they would trap from a race, I'd start doing it again to give them a little reward.
That tamed them down too, I'm sure, right? To come up to you to get their peas.
They did, yeah, the peanuts, raw Spanish peanuts.
Peanuts, yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to say peas. Peanuts, yeah.
And then I went. We have a 400-mile race here, so we have a pretty long series. We do 100, 150 multiple times, and then 200, 250, 300, 350, and then we go back to 100 and 150, and then we jump them out to 400 from Price, Utah. And what I did on that as I started, I'd read a lot of books about racing pigeons like we all have. So I took a little wooden box and I'd screw it on the wall, probably about a week before the 400-mile race. I'd screw that box up there. And then I have a water shelf. So my birds have to go up to get water,
Hmm.
down to the floor to eat, and then back up to a perch. So they're getting exercise all the time, even when they're not out.
Sure.
And what almost always happened, including I was first, second, third, eighth, and ninth place with 5 pigeons on the 400. And I was first and second a couple of more times besides that. But what I did is the day before the race, I'd go get pine needles under the tree
Hmm.
and throw them in the tray. And almost always it was 2 cockbirds, and they would get really into it over that box. Who's going to get that box? And one of them would always win. Well, when he did, I noticed that the other one would be angry and he would take that water shelf. So anytime that other bird wanted to drink, boy, he was on his neck because he took
Yeah,
the nest box.
right.
Well, I was using that on that 400-mile race, and I've had cockbirds come in and land first and second, run straight through the trap, hit that feed tray down in the floor, and just start fighting like crazy before they even get water.
That territoriality, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they want that box. That's great. Yeah, that's a great way to get them motivated and to bring them home and quickly from, it takes a pigeon that's just flying home and turns them into a pigeon that's racing home to get to that box, right?
Oh, yep.
Yeah. So, that's what you did for young and old birds, or did you just fly?
I did that for young and old
Yeah.
birds.
Yeah, that's great.
You
Did
learn a lot. People
yeah,
don't think much about flying rollers, but you actually learn a lot flying rollers
yeah,
because you're watching them every day. When racing pigeons are on the road or when they're routing away from home, you can't see what they're doing.
right.
But the rollers, they fly a figure eight over your house. So you're watching them all the time and you say, well, how do you learn anything from that? I could give them peas and those birds would come down lower. I can give them safflower and they'll go way up higher. And I noticed they got a lot more buoyant on barley, and you had to be careful with that stuff because if you gave them barley several days and then you added some peas or some safflower, some protein, they may disappear on you. They go out of sight.
Hmm.
I also watch them for hours, and I know that if another strange pigeon joins, they start flying a crazy pattern, trying
Huh.
to get rid of it. They don't want it joining their group.
Right.
And I've learned that racing pigeons are that way too when a strange bird comes around. And I think that's one of the reasons we have some of the issues we do in these one-loft races. I think when there's a lot of birds, I've seen them on the release on videos, and they get to swirling around and getting in different packs, and it makes them do funny things.
Yeah, that's interesting. That could affect some of the returns, do you think?
I do.
Yeah,
I think it may cause a, one group may break off and go straight toward the loft, whereas other groups may swirl around a couple of more times, breaking up, and may go a little out of the way and then come back in. And I think in a smaller race, the birds know each other better. Um, there's obviously hawk attacks and falcon attacks, and that changes the dynamics.
right.
But in smaller races, I think the birds pretty much stick. And I think that the birds that are in the lead begin to win through attrition and begin to space out between the birds behind them, which is a good race, especially with a light headwind. I
Perfect.
really like headwind races because that's a straight up, fair race.
Yeah. It's up to the pigeon to persevere at that point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you decided in 2015 to step away from club flying and focus on one loft. So, at this point, how did things change for you? Did you just kind of focus on having a good breeding program for the one lofts? Did you make some changes to your strategy on breeding? How did it change for you?
Well, in 2008, I had my first claws pigeons had arrived. And when I started, I only bought one. And I brought in several others and sold them to other guys, but I only kept one little hen, and it was Conbird's sister. And I mated her to a line bred grandson of Mighty Man, which is a brother of Klein Dirk.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a hit right away. I sent two pigeons to the Vegas race, one loft race, and I won the 250 and the 350 and ended up being second ace pigeon overall with one of those birds. It was the one out of the Conbird sister. And so I figured out that the Koopman on the Claus birds was a hit. I guess it's basically a cannibal. Um, Mighty Man's mother's golden lady, which is
Mm-hmm.
a daughter of cannibal.
Right.
So I kind of figured that out. And I didn't know much about auctions and stuff back then because I always just had my own birds for years. All of my pedigrees, every single bird I had said Easley, 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 Easley on every band. I
Right.
didn't have pedigrees with other people's bands. Um, I just had my own birds. And I started picking up the Claus birds, and that changed a little bit. I found out if you want to win, you have to have some really good pigeons. So I searched them out. The guy was winning a lot, and he was from Germany. He came over here and won the World Ace Challenge in 2006. And then he won it again in 2007, and he won the $1 million race in 2007. And so I bought a bunch of birds. I flew over there actually and bought 26 of them in one shot, hand picked them as youngsters. And one of them was Conbird. And, he bred really well for me right off, right out of the gate. I had fifth ace pigeon over there in South Africa, $1 million race with a little bird called Blue Water Duchess. Um, but I knew that I had some good pigeons. And so I just had to do like I did with other birds. I had to work around that good pigeon, and I did, and it paid off.
So, were you incorporating the birds you got into what you already had, or were you putting them together? Was there any sort of strategy with that?
I was trying to breed them together. Before that, I told you I had some local pigeons, and I had some pigeons from a fellow named John Carnoffel. He's out of California,
Hmm.
and he's been around a long time. Super, super good flyer. And when I got the Claus birds, he came and visited me, and he picked up two sons and a daughter off of Conbird and Ruby. Ruby was a full sister of Birdie, and he started winning in California right away. He won the Breeders' Cup. He won the Triple Crown by an hour and 4 minutes out front. He won the equal first eighth on the California state race, and they were all out of those pigeons. But I had pigeons from him, and they were very good birds too. They were Deverans.
Mm-hmm.
And I had won quite a bit, like in the Canadian race up there. Um, I forget who ran that thing now. It's been a while. But Canadian International had a race up there, and I sent a couple of them little Deverets up there, and they did good. They won the 325 as first place. And then I sent some of them to Plymouth Peak, and I had an ace pigeon there, and I had 3 times equal first, including the final race. I was third. So that's a good little hen there. Then I flew some in the GHC, and I had one that was first on the 400 and fourth on the 600-mile race. I'd never raced in a 600-mile race before. I only sent one bird. A local guy was flying it for me, and he was fourth. That was
Wow.
pretty good.
Yeah. Well, you were hitting the ground running with the one lofts just like you did with the club racing. What does it look like for you when the fall is approaching and you're getting ready to mate up your breeders? What's your process? Are you vaccinating? Are you medicating? Can you dive into some of the techniques you use to get your breeders ready to raise babies?
Yeah, I um, I separate them at the end of season, which is usually the end of May. I don't want to be banding any babies after the end of May, not for racing, because I've found I don't care what you do, unless it's a late race like Big Andes or Florida Derby, um, the yearling races. But for young bird races, you're not going to have anything good after May 31st. I know I've tried and tried. That's it. So I shut them off there, and most of them get a nice molt, and I feed them the highest quality feed I can get my hands on, which is Versalaga Black Label. And I give them the Versalaga all-in-one grit and good, clean well water. My well water, I'm fortunate, has a very high pH. I've tested it. It's as high as some of the glacial water that you pay a lot of money for with high
Right.
pH. We have an aquifer under, and my well is 415 feet deep, and it's down in that aquifer.
Wow.
I think that helps them. I don't vaccinate my breeders. I never have in my entire pigeon life, which is 50 something years. Um, I vaccinate the young birds. I used to vaccinate for salmonella with the sowback, and I used to do pox, and I used to do the PMV, and now all I do is that one that's got rotavirus and
Mm-hmm.
circovirus and PMV. It's a little combo, and I've had good luck with that one. And I quit doing the sowback because it knocked down the babies really hard.
Okay.
I just I didn't feel good about it. This one I can even, and I don't want to start a fad here, so I wouldn't advise doing what I do, but I have given them the vaccination 2 or 3 days before shipping them to a race. Um, and on that bottle, it says immune booster. And I believe that it boosts their immune system when you give them a vaccination. So I think it's really good if you vaccinate them fairly close before you ship them. People don't advise it, but I've seen my birds seem to take the shipping and do a little better about not getting sick if I vaccinate about 3 or 4 days before shipping.
Right. And I guess, do you have to communicate that to the one loft owner that you've already done that?
I do. I
Yeah.
call those guys and say, listen, I gave them the first one. They said, okay, the second will be a booster,
Yeah.
which is really good.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I do the same. I'm usually a couple weeks before shipping, give them their Rota and PMV, and then, by then, if they get another one, it's more of a booster by the time they get there. But what you're saying is a way to boost them as they're going through that process.
It's a stressful process,
Hmm.
and when you give them a vaccination, it boosts their immune system, wakes up, and it's ready.
Hmm.
And I think that's helpful during the shipping.
Absolutely. And
You
what are
get
you doing when they wean? Are you feeding them all they want to eat, grit every day? What kind of supplements? What are we doing for when they're weaning and you're kind of getting them ready for that process of eventually being shipped out?
one of the things that I learned over time is good pigeons are going to do good pretty much no matter what you do. Even, you know, a dummy can have a champion because the pigeons they're sharp
Right.
and, and they know how to get themselves healthy and they know how to fight for food and they've got good systems. They've been around for a long time.
Hmm.
They they have good systems. A healthy pigeon's going to work his way to the front if he's got it in him. But I try to give them every advantage I can. And one of the advantages, when I first started, I always weaned my rollers when they were really little. When their tails are about 2 inches long, out they went to the kit box.
Hmm.
I wanted to train them to come to the whistle and listen to me really well. Um, but with the racing pigeons, I started that way, but I don't think that's the best way. I've seen a little more sickness with them. I lose one every once in a while. Um, so I started leaving them with the parents until the feathers were completely fledged out underneath their wings. And I saw them flying and getting their own water, eating. And my breeder pens are individual pens. I do have a couple of lofts that I have other pairs in, but my main breeders, I've got 12 pair and they're in individuals. And those individuals are the same way. They have a water shelf, they have feed tray on the floor with expanded metal, and the feed is sitting in that feed tray so that they get a lot of grit. I pour grit in the feed tray, and that keeps the bacteria, the healthy bacteria is in that wooden tray.
Hmm.
They're pecking around in it. It's a good way to keep the ecosystem, micro ecosystem going in your loft. You want to be able to pass that good bacteria, and you want those pigeons scratching around and pecking in that grit. You'll say, well, it's dirty. It has some poop and stuff mixed in it. Yeah, it does. It doesn't hurt them a bit. In fact, it's good for them.
Right.
Like I said, you're keeping a little ecosystem there. If you
Right.
keep everything spotless and clean, your pigeons may be fat and beautiful and pretty, but as soon as you send them to that one-loft race, they're going to mix in with all the other kindergartners and they're all going to get sick.
Right.
So you want to keep that good bacteria in their gut and going generation to generation. And the only way to do that is sort of like setting up a saltwater tank. I don't know if you've ever dealt with a saltwater tank.
I haven't.
Well, when you set one up, if you set it up with a wet and dry filtration system, it's flowing water that goes in and out of the tank. And it goes down to another tank that's usually housed underneath behind the wood where people can't see it.
Right.
And it's got these bio balls in there. And these bio balls, when you first get your tank, you put a couple of starter fish, they call them in there. And these starter fish, um, create urine and things like that. And the little natrosomas, they're called natrosomas, will start to populate and they consume um, the nitrogen and things that these fish are putting out. They consume it. And then what they put out, it makes the tank sick again. And you can test it with a chemical tester and it will show you it turns red. That means the water's bad. And then when you get the natural bacter, which is the next level um, established, then it'll turn real pretty and green again, and your water's good. Well, you go through several levels of that to process ammonia, to nitrogen, to until you get to the clean water stage. And then when you get to the clean water stage, you can introduce really nice fish instead of damsels and stuff like that. You can bring in angel fish, flaming angels and different things like that. And they're beautiful and they won't get sick and die like they would with the water's bad. Because those fish are used to tropical water and they need top clean water. It's the same with your pigeons.
Right.
When you set up a loft, there's a lot of people that believe in a deep litter system, which I had when I was a boy growing up. And the birds get incredibly healthy in a deep litter system because there's an ecosystem there.
Mm-hmm.
And that ecosystem is at work with those birds, and those birds pick up all that stuff and it helps their gut and it makes them strong. So when I was a kid, I was the guy that had to rake the pens.
Mm-hmm.
And I raked them, put all that back in the feed bags, rolled it up, carried it out to go to the dump. And my dad had a sand pile. He always brought in fresh sand. I was the guy that had to shovel the sand and then rake it all even in all the lofts when I was a boy. I did that for years.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, dumping those nest boxes out and filling those sacks up, and the dust was in the air everywhere. And I had a bandana on my face, and it's summertime, and I'm hot and sweaty. And I said, when I get big, you know what? When
Yeah.
I get big, I'm going to have a loft that doesn't have all this dust. So I started building all of my lofts with expanded metal. I started with my very first loft was a 1x1 welded wire bottom. And it was only 3 feet, so I could reach the birds deep. And it was from my waist to the top of my head tall with a little roof, slanted roof over it. And it was 4 feet wide, and I had a nest box on each side and a feed tray in the middle, and I'd keep 2 pair in each one of those. And I had multiple pins like that. Well, you can rake underneath. It's fresh air. There's no dust. I don't ever breathe it. The pigeons don't breathe it. Now I've went to a big loft. My lofts are about 8 feet off the ground, so I can walk under them and rake in the fresh air. If I don't do it anymore, I hire someone to come do it. Now a lot of people, they want the fertilizer. They have gardens and they'll come rake it up, sack it up, and take it.
Yeah.
But my birds are clean up there. But then I found out that I didn't really have my little ecosystem. So my birds weren't as resistant as what I needed. So I started out with metal trays, galvanized metal trays that have a 2.5 inch lip on them. And I was going with a 3 feet wide and 4 feet long. And I put them in each one of the 6x8, 8x10 lofts. And I filled them with grit, about a 1/2 inch deep. And after a while, I noticed I started building an ecosystem. But I had a friend come to visit me, and he said, "How come your birds have a dent in their kill?" And I started noticing those young birds were flying down. They were hitting the edge of that metal every once in a while and denting their kill, just a little dent.
Right.
And it bugged me. So I switched over to wood. Well, I found out the wood is even better. The bacteria thrives even better in the wood. So I built them all about 2 inch lip on them, plywood bottom, same size, 3 feet wide and about 4 feet long. And then I put a nice wooden feed tray in there with a lifting top and pour grit in there. And so the birds, they eat. And then I started putting the little clay bowls to put special grit,
Yeah.
you know, in
That's
those.
great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you ever, when you're racing, did you feed on the floor or anything like that for that ecosystem?
I did. I
Yeah.
like that because I notice if you're pouring it in a tray, some of the bigger birds will muscle the little birds out and they're not getting proper nutrition, or they get what's left that nobody else wants. the barley. Your barley is your tester feed. It's like when you get to the end of a roll of tape, it's got a little white one
Yeah,
on. It's kind of the same. The barley, when you get to the barley and it's still there, they've had enough to eat.
right.
Pigeons, they're good actors.
Yeah,
They're hungry all the time. But barley will tell on them.
yeah. Barley's the truth of the measurement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll act hungry and not want the barley. They're being picky at that point.
Hmm.
So, what kind of pigeon do you like to send out to a one loft? So you have 12 pair of breeders, you said. So when you're selecting these young birds that you're going to send out to these one lofts, are you doing an evaluation of them to send them out, or are you just sending out everything? What's your process on how you select from your top pairs, your 12 pairs?
Well, when I first started, I had a lot of birds and I didn't know anything about them except for what I could see, physical attributes. If you study pigeons, and you're well aware of this, they all have little personalities. They all have little quirks. Some cockbirds, like Conbird, the babies are all over the floor flying around, and some of them are still squealing. He'd jump down there and he'll feed all of them. He doesn't care if it's his kid or if it's somebody else's kid. But then you may get another bird in your loft from somebody else, and that bird will scalp the babies until their heads are bloody.
Yeah,
There's different kinds of pigeons. There's some hens that'll let other cocks top them, and there's some hens that won't have it, you know. So I guess they're kind of like us. There's, class and character in pigeons, but you have to look for it. So I study the birds. I watch what they're doing. I see how they, I don't want pigeons that don't take good care of their babies. If they make those babies fat and beautiful and they build a huge nest and they with pine needles and they're good parents, most likely those are good pigeons. They're at least good candidates.
right.
When I had that bird Mukiwa that was the knockout winner and the first hot spot ace pigeon over there in South Africa, that pair of pigeons, the nest that they built was massive. I was afraid the eggs would roll out of there. Yeah, they had a little bowl and I put a pile of pine needles in there, back and forth, back and forth. Next thing I know, they got a stack that's about 6 inches tall with a pair of eggs up on the top.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen those nests too. You're worried they're going to roll out. They somehow keep it together though, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
look at all that stuff.
yeah, you're studying them at that point. So you're studying the young birds as well, their behavior whenever you're going to select them to go to one lofts.
I used to. I used to really study them. I do still now. Um, I watch to make sure that they're eating corn. I want to make sure that those birds are eating corn. If I see a couple of them that aren't eating corn, um, I put that down in my notes and I keep a note of it. I don't like birds that won't eat corn. They don't fit in my program, so I'm keeping a close eye on them. I'll feed them all corn for a week straight, and there's nothing else in there for them to eat, and then they'll start eating corn. But I've got a note of it because I don't like birds that don't eat corn.
Why is it that you don't like that?
Well, corn has good oil in it. When you get in the long races in a one loft race, the birds that eat corn, they're going to get that good oil. Carbs give them a burst of energy. That's what you get when you're giving them patty rice and barley and those sorts of things. Hard red wheat, Milo, it's got a lot of carbs in it. And that's for burst of energy, like taking off. But when a bird is in race mode for 350, 400 miles, that bird, you've seen a dove flying over during dove season that's been shot at a time or two. He's up there and he's just flicking those wings.
Hmm.
He's cruising. Well, that's what our pigeons do when they're on the way home and they get in that rhythm and they start flicking those wings. That's where that corn oil comes in. That's where the corn, and you want those birds that are eating corn, um, in my opinion.
Yeah, it makes total sense to me.
because I know that that's what gives them that sustained power, that they can continue on. And there's a lot more things to it, but
So when you're deciding who to send to one lofts, do you handle them first to make sure that they're the kind of bird you want? Is there a certain size in your hand that you like, or how does that process work?
there is obviously a certain size, but I learned a long time ago because I keep meticulous notes, that I would send a pair of nestmates, and one of them would look like $1,000,000. I mean, it's just absolutely pristine, perfect. One pintail, tight, smooth feathers like they were poured on, very alert, wouldn't let you hold its beak, the right depth, tight vent bone, short arm bone, louvered primaries with good ventilation, short secondaries. I mean, everything you're looking for, the pigeon would have. And he'd have an ugly nestmate that was kind of rangy and kind of bony on the breastbone and maybe a little open in the vents, and the arm bone was a little long and just kind of feathery. Uh, but I'd send both of them. And then when they came home, to my amazement, the one that won was that rangy, ugly one. And when they got home, he was gorgeous. He was actually prettier, and I've had them both come home. And he was a nicer bird than the one that was perfect when they were little after they flew. So I started learning you can't tell which one of those birds to send, and it's different in different families. And the way you combine the genetics when you put a pair together, you don't know what's going to come out. So you have to be real careful that you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. What I think is more important, you've asked me a question and I'm going to answer it. What I think is more important is that you put the emphasis on your breeding pair. And I've always said you have to go with the blood. Um, if there's one thing I can tell you that's a good, I think, and it's worked for me over the years, is you got to go with the blood, you know. And you say, well, what does that mean, Ken? Well, if you've got some Jansen, Arden, Deverant, whatever crosses that you've been flying for 35 years here in the United States, they may do real good for you here. But if you're sending over to Pattaya,
Hmm.
it's a whole different kind of pigeon, and those pigeons may not do anything. I've seen this time and time again, and they won't do anything. So you've got to change your strategy and you got to change your thinking. So the answer, um, is to put your emphasis on the pair of breeders, and then the babies that they have. Obviously, you want to make sure they've got 10 flights on each side.
Right.
Sometimes I find one with 11. Sometimes I find one with 11 on both sides. But I always count the flights and make sure they have at least 10 on each side. If they've got 9, I don't send them.
Right.
And I get a 9 flighter every once in a while. I like to make sure that they're not messed up in the middle. Racing pigeons, if you bred them long enough, you start to notice that there's some of them that get overlapping feather right there in the middle.
Yeah. I've seen
And
that.
some of those, I've sent them to races and they actually did okay, but I've never had one win, especially if they've got any kind of a gap in there. You want that wing to be perfect. You want those cover feathers to be perfect and smooth and flow into the long feathers. You want them smooth. You want that bird, you know, I know birds with long hanging down kills and opened up in their rear end, and their vent bones are sticking down and they're opened up. I know they can win 5 and 6 and 700-mile races, but one-loft races are not 5 and 6 and 700-mile races.
Right.
They're 325, they're 300 California Classic, they're 350 at the Hoosier. That's where all the money's at. And you go race, in Thailand Masters is 328 miles, and Africa Pro is 326 miles. You need a pigeon that's smooth and fast, and you want those vent bones to go in line. When you feel that kill, you always see me in my videos and you see me feel that bird.
Hmm.
I'm feeling to see if those vent bones are in line going up with the end of that kill. I want them smooth. I want them going up. You know, I like them to be touching or almost touching, and I don't like them to be like fish bones. Uh, Birds are too weak. They don't have the power. They don't have to be strong and massive. I think you can overdo everything. I just
Sure.
think they need to be solid.
Right.
You be in line. So you want a smooth pigeon. They need good, strong shoulders with a good arch on there. When you pull that out, most people look at the flights and the wing, and which is smart. You should, and check the arm bone. I think that's intelligent. I think you should. But I think a lot of people fail to look at the back wing, the length of the back wing. I think they probably, I don't know many people that I've ever seen that looks at the front of that arm bone. You know, when a bird's flying and stuff, they can get lift depending on how that's shaped right there. Birds that have really strong shoulders, they have an arch right here. It goes up. Take your strongest bird this evening if you have time. Pull this wing out. You'll see it's got a big arch right there. You want that. You want that power um, for those kind of races. It doesn't matter as much when you start getting to 5, 6, 700. You're looking for determination and a pigeon that can paddle all day long.
Yeah.
But that bird's not going to win a one-loft race.
Right. That makes sense. And so I want to go back to a point you made earlier because I think it's a great point. You're talking about trusting in the blood of your breeders, and you talked about the differences in a Pattaya versus a race here in the States. Is kind of what you're saying somewhat like horses for courses, meaning if your goal is Pattaya, you might want to try and find blood that's working there, not necessarily blood that's working here in Oklahoma for me. But if I want to play in Africa or Pattaya or Victoria Falls, I need to find the type of blood that's working and incorporate that in.
It's exactly what I mean. It's like when I was flying in Africa one year, they went 411 miles. And they say it's the most difficult race they ever had. So they only had 53 day birds. There was 3,478 birds released that day. And I pulled one of my birds all the way across the board, except for the $1,000 one, which I should have almost did, but it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I won all of that except for the big one, which I should have done. I would have won that one too. But my wife asked me, she said, how do you know which one of those birds to pull? Don't you have 6 birds over there? And I said, you got to go with the blood. And I was right. That bird was out of Birdie's full sister, Ruby. And I know those pigeons. And if you look at a globe, have you ever looked at one of those little spinning globes like they have in the schoolhouse?
Yeah.
You can spin them around
Hmm.
and they have latitude lines and they got longitude lines on them. Well, if you grab hold of that latitude line and you spin that thing around and keep your finger on that latitude line, you'll see that Germany is just about in line perfectly with the South African $1 million race. And you say, well, what does that do? Well, it does a lot. I knew to use that bird that I had from Germany. Birdie was born and bred in Germany at Südhof van Beers, and so was my little ruby hen. And I knew that that would help me. And then I had a 400-mile, a bird that was good at breeding 400-mile pigeons. He had bred me multiple 400-mile winners. And so I put that pair together and I knew that was the one to bet on, even though she wasn't winning in prior races. I think she was 277th place and 377 in the 2 races before, as I recall. But I knew that was the bird. And sure enough, it was headwinds. It was hard. Out of 3,478 birds with 53 day birds, and she was 35th place.
Wow.
She was a good pigeon. And then something else I noticed, Alphonse Claus was up a little higher. I think I can't remember if I was 25th or 35th. Anyway, it's one of those. And he was at 16th, just above me. And I texted him. I said, "Hey, what was yours out of?" And he said it was out of 210. Well, 210 is the full sister of the mother of mine, 300. So there were two full sisters of Birdie. Um, that's what I mean when I say you got to go with the blood.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. I haven't heard that one. The globe and studying it that way, that's very interesting. It makes a lot of sense too. Um, I think horses for courses is something that is important, and certainly finding the blood that's winning in the course that you're wanting to do well in is kind of one of the basis of having success, especially in one lofts for sure.
Yep.
Um, you've been over to Europe. You've been over, over and done a lot of loft visits. How did you get started with? Because I've seen you on Pipa, and you seem to be working with them in some shape, form, or fashion. How did that kind of begin for you?
Well, I was breeding the claws pigeons, and I still am. I have a line Conbird, Blue Power, and I started mixing in the birdie pigeons, and I built a little nucleus, and they were winning for me. I had equal first at the Hoosier final, 350, and my bird was seventh through the trap, and he was right off of a son of Conbird named Easy Money, and I had him mated to a daughter of Willie and Ruby. And Ruby was a full sister of Birdie.
Mhm.
Willie was out of another full sister of Birdie. So I had three times Birdie in that pigeon. I was doing really good with those. And then if you've ever done any pretzel breeding and line breeding, you understand what I'm saying when I say I hit a wall. It seemed like they're bred a little tight, and I hit a wall and they stopped producing winners. I still got some, they were coming home, but they didn't have that bang. And that's when a breeder knows. I've run into it before when I was raising rollers and stuff when I was younger. I know when I've hit a wall, and that means bring in some new blood.
Exactly.
And so I did the same thing I did with the claws birds. I did my study. And you can say what you want to about Pippa, but those guys, those young men are smart.
Mhm.
They're in the middle of the heart of the racing pigeon world. Germans have fantastic pigeons, no question. And those guys are always tough to beat. The Kuwait pigeons, they're tough. They got to fly across the desert. There's no water holes. Those guys got to come home or die.
Right.
They have tough pigeons. But if you look at their pedigrees, I don't care what pedigree it is, where it's at. I don't care if it's from South Africa. Almost always, them pigeons go right back to Belgium, or Netherlands at the very least.
Right.
But almost all of them, if you follow back far enough, they all have a B for Belgium.
Right.
That's because Belgium is the heart of the racing pigeon. And the people that are in the know, they know that. When guys go to get serious pigeons and they want to start, they know the breeding stock is in Belgium. Those are the best. Now you can maintain them by flying against a lot of numbers and sending out a lot of birds and only keeping the top 1% and really culling hard. Um, you have to have a very high standard if you want to keep up with the Belgian standards. And Belgians fly a little different. They're flying mostly in clouds and stuff like that. It depends on where you're flying. California or out here in New Mexico, Arizona, we have a lot of blue skies, a lot of sunny days, a little different kind of a pigeon. But all in all, they're a good, solid place to start, in my opinion. If I get pigeons here in the USA, um, they will be from Belgium too, somewhere back there. But they've
Yep.
been diluted a lot down through the generations. Um, so I preferred to research And who better to get birds from than the guys that are running the biggest auction house, and they're in Belgium, and they go, and since they were little boys, their dad is Carlo Heselbrecht. The guy is a extreme long distance Barcelona guy. I mean, he's a real pigeon man. He's been around forever. He flies a lot of the Van Bruins pigeons. Um, but those guys grew up hearing about pigeons, and they started their website, and they want high quality. So they didn't go around and just grab pigeons to sell. These guys are very discerning. They know who's winning. They meet guys like Pascal Hasselbrecht, Pascal Arian, and the Hasselbrecht young men. They see him winning nationals, and he's got pigeons, that are phenomenal. And they've got their Wacko Freddy line that they're working on, down from the old Sublons all the way back to their dad's old Barcelona winner. And they see this guy winning a lot, and so they start making crosses. And it's not long before, they've got the Tarzan and New Patricia blood, long distance, tough pigeons. Then they bring in a little Bart Gerinks with Liv, uh, and they start producing, Olympic champions with Bart. It doesn't take you very long to figure out if a guy's winning a lot of first nationals and 3 first Olympiads in one year, like Gladiator Junior, Miss Million 595, Olympic Miss Million 210. Those guys did their homework, and I did mine. And so I called Nicholas up and I said, listen, Porsche 911, I've been looking, and he's one of your best breeders. And he said, yes, he is. He's our #1 breeder. I said, been looking at Nest Sister Boxster, and she's a fabulous breeder. I would like to have you mate those together. And he said, they're full brother and sister, Ken. We've never done that before. And I said, I know, but if I'm going to spend money, I want nothing but Wacko Freddy and Liv. And he said, okay, we'll do it for you. And so he sent me the first pair of babies, and I started crossing them on my Claus birds, and it was a hit right away, just like I thought it would be. Claus birds are beautiful pigeons. They're a tiny bit bigger, not much. They're not large pigeons, but they are substantial, stout pigeons. And these birds are a little more refined. And so I crossed them, and the strength and power of the Claus birds and the refinement of those Porsches, and the Porsches are smart. They're smart pigeons. I put those together, and I started hitting right away. And then I've done some crossing with those Africa winners. It didn't matter to me if they were from Kuwait, Slovenia. I don't care. What I'm looking for is a strong pigeon. And these birds are tough. You get some of them back from Africa, like Puggle and Renee. You look at those birds, you can tell they've been
Yeah.
fighting basket and flying against falcons and everything else. Pull them up and look at them, and they're like looking at little T-Rexes with feathers. They're tough pigeons.
Mm-hmm.
And I love crossing those on those refined blue bloods from Belgium. Good Porsche pigeons.
So going back to what you're saying, so my dad, so I learned from my dad, and that's where I got my start. And my dad brought pigeons over from Belgium from guys like Antoine Jacobs and Theo I Scout and many others. Mike Gannis helped my dad acquire some birds too. And during my childhood, teenage years, and growing up, my dad was mixing those lines together. So whenever I took over and started doing it, I knew back in around 2021, 2020 that I hit my wall where I had taken what my dad had put together and put it into a situation where it was time to cross out. And I think, correct me if, or, to let me know if you agree or disagree, but I think what my dad always taught me is you have birds that when they hit that wall, that they have a lot of prepotency to breed. And what you need is to add hybrid vigor, and you get your hybrid vigor by crossing two extremely good lines together and that's where you get your super racers. So it sounds like to me you hit that point where you had a lot of your prepotency from your original line and you needed to cross out. So you targeted that Porsche line from Pipa to add in uh, your line to their line for that cross to get that hybrid vigor that has exploded into what you're racing today. Is that correct?
100%. I'm always looking to create the hybrid vigor, and I want to bring that prepotent line that has flown at a high level. I want to bring that back out, with power. So that's exactly what I was doing.
And I
Yeah.
that's what I did as well. I went to Belgium in 2022 and acquired some birds over there with my partner in Colorado, Garrett, and we brought birds back in and started crossing them in, and they've already been very good for one lofts and here locally club racing, and that getting the, like you said, doing that research to get the birds that are doing well and figuring out what'll cross in well to your bloodline is something you always kind of have to keep your eye on and study. I think that's an important thing for people to take away is to continue to study. Um, so did you get to go over there whenever you requested that mating? Did you get to go over there and see them in person, or was this something you did? Because I've seen pictures with you over there. Is that something you did after you got those birds, or?
I got that pair and then I arranged a trip and flew over and I handled all of their top national winners, their Olympiads and all their top breeders. I handled all of them from the father, from Thomas and from Nicholas. And they're all, man, they're fantastic birds. I like those best kittles. They're good pigeons too. The Porsches are good pigeons. The best kittles aren't as refined, but I see in them a lot of raw power, and that's attractive when you're racing pigeons. You need that in your family.
Yeah,
And those birds, they have that. They've got that long three flights sticking out there on the end with good louvered feathers. I mean, those best kittles are attractive birds too.
yeah,
But yeah, I went over there and handled them. And of course, while I was over there, I said, I want some out of this pair and some out of this pair. And, I like that Prince Porsche. Um, Size, when you're looking for a breeding pigeon, you don't worry about size as much. What you're looking for is conformation. I want everything balanced, everything in proportion. That bird ought to feel like he's perfectly balanced. If I see anything off, I don't want to mess with it because then I got stuff to fix. I don't want to be fixing things. I want the right one from the start. He's going to fix me. I'm not going to fix him. Um, he's going to make me look smart. He's going to make me win, not the other way around. So I'm real picky, and that Prince Porsche, you know, is a fabulous bird. He truly is. And Porsche 911 also. Porsche 911 is felt like almost the perfect race bird. I don't think he could get him a whole lot better than that. His body, everything was symmetrical, everything was streamlined, and he just is a lot like Yelly Rosier's has a bird he calls Seven. That bird's built the same way as Porsche 911. Those birds are streamlined. It's like holding a Ferrari.
yeah,
They are right for racing. He was a good breeder too. Both of them are. Seven and Porsche 911 are great breeders. Prince Porsche, in my opinion, is a little more, um, I think he's probably a little better breeder. And the reason I say that is because I think when you're working on racing pigeons all the time, sometimes they can get a little too, they get smaller, I've noticed. And sometimes they start to lose some of that stamina and power. And so you need that heavy, feathered, strong, oily pigeon that's all perfect and spongy muscle to get those kind of birds. I think that's the kind of pigeon like Wacko Freddy's like that. And he's the father of Porsche 911. And I think Prince Porsche is more like a breeder to me, my estimation of him. Um, and then I like the Olympic hens. They're really nice. the 595 and 210. And I asked him, I said, will you mate those to Prince Porsche and make me youngsters? Because I already have multiple youngsters out of Porsche 911 paired to hens I like my Wacko 694. We co-bred with those. And I've got some of those too out of Porsche 911 and my hen. So I wanted some out of Prince Porsche, and then that the hen is the mother of Gentle Lady, is a super nice pigeon. I bought that hen, by the way, in their sellout auction, and the father too. I didn't buy the father. That was a gift from Nicholas. He and I became friends while I was over there hanging out, and we've talked a lot, messaging and things. And it was just a nice gesture on his part. He just called me one day out of the blue and he said, "Hey, I'm gonna send you the father of Gentle Lady." I said, "Awesome."
Yeah, that's incredible.
So I'll have the pair over here. Those are really good pigeons. I had a son over here and he bred me several winters. His grandson is breeding me winters. They're good birds.
And your individual pins, did you say you have a dozen of them, 12 of them?
I do have a
So
dozen
is
individuals.
that where you're doing your only breeding? Or are you doing any breeding in your other lofts?
Those are my main 12 pair, and those are bred to go to one loft races. And then I have two other lofts. It's all in one big loft. It's just one on each end,
Right.
that are like 8 by 10. I got a hallway going down front and then two more lofts in the middle. But those end ones, I have nest boxes set up in there. And I usually put 4 or 5 pair in those. And I will, if I'm breaking up a pair of these in the 12 and wanting to repair them another way, when they lay, I'll pull those eggs and put them under one of those pairs. And those are outstanding pigeons. I don't keep foster parents. The pigeon has to be fantastic or he's out of here.
Right.
Pigeons in those cages are tops too. They may be very young and they may have to wait their turn and I might have to see. So I'll breed out of these are my main birds. I'll shift a few eggs when I'm changing pairs to these. And these are usually young birds that came back from a race that I'm testing. And I'll send them to smaller races to test. I'll send them to Thailand Masters. Well, that's not a smaller race. That's got 5,200, 6,000 pigeons.
Yeah.
I sent a few there. I sent some to Sooner. Sooner's a good race. It's not a huge race, but it's a good race. Or send some to High Desert, Cuevas Classic, California Classic. I'll send those around to test
Hmm.
those young birds. And those are kind of make it, break it deal. If I get one that hits up in the money, top 1%, I really wake up on that pair and start looking at what I've got. And I don't let them raise much. They'll raise like the bird that was 10th ace pigeon in Thailand. Hard to believe, but true. That bird was a foster bird because he was young. He was a late bred and he was really young. I threw him in there and I put a hen that came back from the Cuevas. And she was from Big Tex Spot Portia, mated to, which was a good bird, mated to a Puggle Coco Chanel winning hen that had come back from a race, 400 miler. I threw her in there and they made it up. So I used them for fosters because they're both young. Um, and near the end of year, or late middle, I didn't have anybody laid the same time as they did. So I let them raise a pair of babies of their own. And one of them, I just didn't um hatch. It didn't hatch. So I only had one baby. When I went to band them, there was only one in there. So I banded them. And when they got older, I put them in the weaning pen. And then when I was sending birds to Thailand, wanted to send tester birds because I didn't get any of those birds back. You rarely get those birds back. You don't even know. I didn't know when the auction was. You have to do all kinds of research just to find the auction. Um, Sometimes they end in the middle of the night when I'm asleep. I have a job,
Right.
you know, have my own business, and I don't stay up all night waiting to buy a pigeon.
Right.
So um, I only bred one baby from the pair, and I sent it over there as 10th ace pigeon out of all of those birds from all over the place. So I'm looking at him really close. That cockbird, um, you remember I told you I mated Porsche 911 to nest sister Boxster with Nicholas?
Yes.
Well, I got two youngsters, and they're a cock and a hen, Porsche GTS and my little spot Porsche. Well, I mated them together, and that's their son. So he's pure wacko Freddy Live and really mixed good.
Mm-hmm.
And I had him tested, and he's a AACTCT, um, LDHA, and
Yeah.
DRD testing. I didn't do the cry one testing. I need to do that. I haven't gotten into that yet, but I'll check it out.
Yeah, testing something that is kind of the past few years become a lot, a lot of people are doing that. My partner Garrett does a lot of testing as well. I haven't personally done a lot of testing on my birds, but do you think that's something that is something people should look at?
I think it's too early to tell. I've had success both ways.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little confusing to put any kind of a point on. It's like, well, I tell you what, let's look at, you know, the birds that have been winning. You could look at birds that won at South Africa, like Sun City. Mike had him tested as a BB. Um, Thomas Six, BB. Puggle, BB. Sade, BB. Renee, BB. All these birds are BB, CC. There's no T gene, there's no A gene, but yet they won some of the toughest races in the world. Um, so I know that the B birds can win, and I know the CCCCs can win. So I think it's more about selection. I think you have to stay at the top of the 1%. I do have A birds, uh, and I have tested them because I'm curious and I'm tracking it. Uh, and they do okay. I have some ABs that hit for me. Uh, haven't done as good with the AAs when sent out to racing, but they seem to be pretty good little breeders when you cross them on a BB. All the babies are ABs, and I've had some success with the ABs. I honestly think that the B is important. Um, I think if you had a loft full of AAs, you may be going the wrong direction. And a loft full of BBs, you might be able to win, but maybe not as much.
That's
That's my
interesting.
suspicions.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Um, how does a pigeon make it into your top 12? I mean, that has to be very difficult, right? For a bird to get to that point where it makes it into one of those spots.
Well, I obviously don't want to fight with all of the guys on the auctions and try to pay $100,000 for every single bird that's first place through the hole. So that gives you two options. You can buy a few of them, like I did. I just bought one from the genetic one-loft race. She's first place on the final 723 kilometers, which is about 450 miles. And it was a 12 race series. And she was the first ace pigeon, first on the final, and she was three times equal first during the series. She was second, third, and fourth on three of the longer races. So this bird was three times equal first, one time first, and first ace. First final, first ace. I mean, that's a really good pigeon.
Yeah.
So I bought that one and brought it in. So I look for special pigeons like that. Um, and I'm not too proud to get on the telephone and say, Mike, uh, I want something out of that Lena and the Thomas Six. And he said, well, I've got the mother of Lena. And I said, well, I want something out of that pair. Send me a pair of babies. So I'll get a pair of babies. Those are good German hardcore racing pigeons, and they proved it in big numbers. Um, so I took those and I crossed them with the Porsches, and I've had a couple of winners with them. They did pretty good for me. I was first place at Big Andy's on the 400 with a Porsche crossed on my buddy Tim's HVR Arden Cockbird, real long distance. And I got the hybrid vigor, what I told you I'd do. Anyway, I got first place on that one, but I had another bird that was 30th place and it wasn't far behind, just below that. And it was out of that Thomas 6 cockbird that I got, made it to the daughter of the mother of the first place. It was a
That's
direct
incredible.
daughter of Porsche 911 and my Wacko hen. So it was the mother of the 30th place. So hope that
Yeah.
answered your question.
Yeah. I mean, they have to be in that top level. They have to be in that top percentage, right? So, if you're going to bring a bird in from one of these one lofts, it has to have done some special racing in order to get into that group.
Yeah, a lot of people, you hear people say winners breed winners. Well, yeah, but not necessarily. I've had some pigeons that were phenomenal pigeons. I brought them home and I was almost a giddy when I was pairing them up. I was so excited. And then I sent them races all over the country and all overseas and nothing. You can have pigeons that are champs and you can move them to 6 different mates, top grade mates, and send out 6 or 8 babies to races and never get a good one. And so I discard those pigeons. I get rid of them. There's pigeons that are breeders and there's pigeons that are racers, and there's a few that are racer
Do both.
breeders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My best breeding hen right now flew at the Hoosier in 2021, and of the entire series, she had one really good competitive race. Otherwise, she was late. And when I got her back, she was just beautiful. She's perfect in the hand for my standard, and I really liked her pedigree, what she was out of, and so I gave her a chance as a breeder, and she has bred the first Oklahoma Hall of Fame here locally in club racing, and she's bred 2 one-loft winners already. So I think sometimes that, like you said, some birds are just great at breeding. Some birds, you're looking, obviously, we all want that one that can duel, but those are so few and far between. Those are the ones you hear about that, like your Klein Dirk, like your Blixum, like your, Harry for Hoymans, and these rare birds that you hear about. The reason they're so rare is it's hard to find. So yeah, it's pretty amazing when you can find one like that for sure.
And you got different kinds of breeders too, um, to figure into that. I mean, you look at a guy like Mike Gannis, and Mike is a friend of mine. Uh, he's kind of like an excavator almost. And I mean that in a good way. We would all do that, if that was our business. This is his business. He's a professional. That's what he does for a living. And an excavator looking for gold is moving tons of dirt, and they're going to find more gold than you are because you're one little miner with a little pan and a pick. Well, I have my own business. So for me, pigeons, I'm a pan and a pick. So I have to be extremely particular if I plan to keep up with the Pipas, the Mike Gannises, the Thomas Corneliuses of the world, the George Oswalds, those top guys. The only way you're going to keep up with them is if you're extremely picky, especially if you got a small operation and it's not your full-time deal.
Yeah.
So that's another, piece of what you were talking about.
Yeah, is to, I think one of the biggest things from this discussion, I think people can take away that I've loved that you've repeatedly said is studying and paying attention, not only to your pigeons and what's going on in your own loft, but to what's going on around the country, around the world, at these different races, what bloodlines are working, and being a student of the game. It's easy to get your ego going and to, be stuck in your ways, right? But you seem, and I think Mike does a great job of this too, is constant adaptation, constantly studying what's next. Mike has brought in decades worth of pigeons and continued to develop and reshape what he's doing and his goals, and he's always several steps ahead and on what he's bringing in. And so continuing to study that sort of thing and pay attention to what is working, I think is a very big advantage for sure.
I agree. And I think it's good too to be able to send out a lot of pigeons and to be able to test them. Sometimes we hear stuff like, well, yeah, he won, but he sent 150 birds. It doesn't matter. The bird came out of one pair of pigeons. It's still one individual pigeon and it's still one. He just found the nugget of gold in there and he found it quicker. What if he'd only sent 10 pigeons? He might not ever found that bird, right?
Right,
But he did. He found it.
right.
So I think, we would all probably, if we're all professional flyers and able to do it, I think we'd all be happy to let Pattaya test out our babies, all of them,
Yeah,
wouldn't we?
right,
I would, you know, but I've got a business. I don't have time to raise that many birds, but
right.
I can sure see an advantage there. Um, and when it comes to numbers, I say bring it on.
Yeah,
Uh, I'm not
exactly.
one of those guys squealing because somebody's got more entries than I do. I
Yeah.
really like it if I've only got like 3 birds and I beat somebody.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's the best feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need less squealing in the sport. That's for sure, right?
Yeah. As I get
Um,
here, I'm reverting to some of the farm language.
yeah, well, we got that in common. So, um, I'm taking up a lot of your time here. I appreciate it. If you were starting over 2024, or maybe you're new to the sport 2024, what advice do you have to people who are watching? My audience is experienced flyers down to brand new guys and in between. Is there some advice you can give people who are watching and kind of looking for guidance on how to get going?
Yeah. What I would look at first is a good loft. A guy can beat you with a doghouse converted into a loft. I've seen it, so I know it works. But if you're going to be serious, build you a good loft. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be well thought out. You can even have a small loft, but I would look at the loft. I'd make sure that loft is turned toward the south so it's getting sun in the winter in the front during the winter solstice, and then it's in the shade in the summer solstice, and it's got a lot of good air, but without being wet and damp and too much air. Um, so a good loft to me is very important. I'd make sure that I had a good loft. The next thing I would do, waiting on pigeons to come in from imports. You can if you want to. Truth of the matter is it takes time for them to get over here. You got to pay a lot of money to get a good import. You have to pay a lot of money to get them through quarantine now. And half the time they come in, some of the hens won't lay because they've picked up some salmonella, um, or maybe they bring something that jumps and gets into your loft a little bit. I'm not knocking anybody for bringing in imports. You said, is there a good way to start? I believe that there are just as good of birds right here now in the USA as there are anywhere. Belgium's the birthplace. It's a good place to go. They have top quality, but we have good pigeons here in the USA. And a
Hmm.
lot of them are most of them are Belgium based pigeons. They're good birds. I would find somebody that's winning a lot. I mean, there's some top guys out there that aren't playing around. You got Mike Gannis you can look at. You got guys like Schilling over there. He won the $1 million race. He's got some good cannibal based birds. You got the Baldwin, Thomas over there. Um, he's not an amateur. He's a serious player. He's got good pigeons. You got John the Greek. He's a good one. Big Andy. I could name 50 more if I sat here long enough. There's a new, and he's not new, but he's sprung into the scene in the last few years, that Aztec loft.
Mm-hmm.
That guy has some quality pigeons. The guy went
Absolutely.
out, he's not messing around. He's going for the good stuff. I would go to guys like those and others. You can find guys that have been flying in a club and winning a lot. If I was going for club guys, I would go for guys that have flown them the distance. I think that says a lot, especially if you're planning on sending them out in tough races. You need guys that's flying to 500 and 600 miles, because those guys have serious pigeons.
Mm-hmm.
You flying 100 to 300 miles in young birds, and you're on the short end and stuff. I'm not probably going to be too interested in looking at those birds. If I was starting out, look for birds that have flown 500, 600+ miles here in the USA, and a guy that's been at it for 20 years and he's winning a lot on those long races. You can bring one of those in and do really well with them. Or a guy that's bringing in winners like Mike. He has um, Thomas Six over there. That's a great pigeon. You can get a line breeding off of him that's carrying Romario and that Joseph and Pidgey in that blood, uh, a line bred one and crossed onto, a 600 miler family from here. I think it'd be a great option.
Yeah.
You can go for some Porsches. I have Porsches. I know there's a couple other guys in the States that have them. They're good birds.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. The good loft is so you have the health, and then you want to get good pigeons. And when you're starting out, uh, that's probably the best advice I could give you. And I wouldn't, everybody do what they want to. It's your pigeons. You pay the feed bill. You do whatever you want to do. But if you're asking my advice, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on tonics and potions and apple cider vinegars and all of that crap. What they need is good, clean water with a good pH on it. They don't need a bunch of junk in there. You need to give them really top grain feed. See that Versalaga black label? That's not just seed. It's got 3 different pellets in there. It's got a yellow one, it's got an orange one, and it's got a green one. And all them pellets have different things in them. And that Versalaga all-in-one grit mixed with it gives them every vitamin and mineral necessary for a pigeon.
Right.
Now, if you just want to be with your pigeons and do stuff, I'd say go down there and get you a bunch of spinach, and flip it to the side of the pen and let them pull on that spinach. It's good for them. They like it. Hang a head of cabbage in there and let them go to town on that. Keeps them from getting bored, you know. Uh, but they're not going to do all of that. When you send your bird to a one-loft race, Brito or Rex or Jim Ward or Ruan Lowe and Africa Pro, those guys aren't going to go over and give your guys pills and tonics and all that stuff. These things are going to be flying in a one-loft race. It's every man for himself. They need to be
Right.
tough.
Right.
So if you're building pigeons that need all of that, they're not going to compete. And you're not going to reach the top rungs. You need a tough pigeon with an immune system.
Right. That's great advice. Um, Last question I have for you. Do you have a proudest moment that you've had, whether it's in your club racing or one loft, a moment that you sticks out to you as the one that you remember the most with your pigeons?
Yeah, I do. I've had first place wins like at Big Andes, or I've won first hotspot winner. I've won the first knockout. I've actually won a knockout a couple of times. I've had some good moments in my racing pigeon career, but none of them, to me, none of them is like the day that same pigeon, he won first place on the 350 with a 10-minute lead that I told
Mm-hmm.
you about.
Mm-hmm.
Did something the race before that that was amazing. I told you I live up in the mountains and everybody else on the other side down by the river way down there. We had a 250-mile race. I carried my birds to town like I always do, turned them in. They went on the race. I got up the next morning, went outside, this whole mountain, the whole mountains, the whole thing. You couldn't see anything. It was socked in so tight with fog. I couldn't even see my race loft
Yeah.
back door. And of course, I went into a panic. Now, maybe that's part of the reason it was so exciting to me. I don't know. Um, but I went out there and I'm walking and pacing. I got a balcony on the front of my loft, so it's up really high and I can see the pigeons coming. I'm up there pacing and I can't see nothing but fog, so I can't see any pigeons coming. Can't even see the house from the loft. And I'm starting to get a little upset. I'm saying, this is bad. I'm going to lose all my pigeons. And then all of a sudden, I'm looking and this pigeon comes, this beautiful blue bar cock, and he's out of the sister of Mila, who bred my BB-8 big hotspot knockout winner, 5th place by seconds in the $1 million race. Here he comes, her nephew, and he's coming through and he's folded up, and as he comes in and he folds, I can see him, and he's like 10 feet out, and he throws his wings to put on the brakes
Mm-hmm.
and spread his tail, and that fog kind of swirls, and it reminds you of one of those, I don't know, it's the most beautiful, man, love that.
Yeah. It's something you wish that you could recapture, but it's a rare moment, right?
I went to town and turned in my module, and everybody said, well, congratulations. And I said, how did I do it? He was 6th place.
Wow.
And I was traveling down, it was all foggy. I'm driving. And after I came out of the mountains and went down into the valley, it was perfect blue sunshine everywhere. The only place that was socked in was all of the mountains. They're all socked in with fog. And so to get 6th place coming up the mountain like that, flying from the west with all that fog, it was a miracle pigeon. And then he proved it again on that 350,
350. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's what we're all looking for, right?
I've won first on the 400s. I told you about that. And that's exciting. And I was elated, like winning Big Andy's
Mm-hmm.
this year. What was that, first place? I was elated. I was really excited. It was good, but nothing compares to that day with that bird.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that one.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I haven't covered that you want to add to the conversation? Anything I missed?
No, I was just trying to be helpful.
No, this is great. Everyone's gonna love it. I've got a bunch of more questions for the next time we meet because this has been awesome and I really appreciate it. If people want to contact you, what's the website?
It's Ken Easley Racing Pigeons.
And they can find you there. Is the Facebook or anything like that they can reach out to you, or is the website the best?
I'm on Facebook under Ken Easley, and then I also have a Ken Easley and Son Racing Facebook page. I don't know why I don't combine them, but I do. And my phone number is on one of them.
Okay, perfect. Well, people can hop on the website to get to contact you, and would really like to have you on again to keep discussing, and maybe once this next one-loft season gets going, we can have you back on, talk about what you're up to and how things went. And I wish you nothing but the best, and I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a
Appreciate
good
it. Yeah,
discussion.
maybe we can talk about throats and eyes and feathers and stuff and spongy muscle next time.
Yeah, we'll add that in next time and go over all that. And it's just been an awesome conversation. You gave me a lot to think about as well, and so I really appreciate your time and coming
You
on.
bet.
So thank you, Ken Easley and Son Racing Pigeons, and we'll have you back on.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, thank you.